Over the years, the NFL has evolved through a long series of rule changes and strategic innovations. As the game has changed, passing statistics have exploded, and the modern era is filled with never-before-seen statistical accomplishments. With all that said, there are still some records unlikely to ever be touched. Here are some NFL records that will never be broken. Jerry Rice, 22,895 career receiving yards. Even though it's easier to accrue passing and receiving statistics in today's NFL, Jerry Rice's career receiving yards record still remains insurmountable. The closest active player to Rice's 22,895-yard tally is longtime Arizona Cardinal and future Hall of Famer Larry Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald had an amazing 16-year career that includes 9 1,000-yard seasons, and he still needs another 5,812 yards to tie the longtime 49er. Rice's career spanned 3 decades and featured an incredible 14,000-yard seasons. He led the league in receptions twice, and both receiving yards and receiving touchdowns 6 times. Arguably the greatest player in league history, Rice was a leader on 3 Super Bowl winning teams with the San Francisco 49ers, and was the leading receiver at the age of 40 for an Oakland Raiders team that would reach the Super Bowl in 2002. Rice wasn't just great, his greatness maintained at an unparalleled rate in an era where protection for wide receivers from physical hits and coverage were far less present. Yet, even with all the changes, it still seems impossible that anyone could amass roughly 23,000 yards. Brett Favre, 321 consecutive starts. There's a reason Brett Favre is considered one of the greatest Ironmen in NFL history. From 1992 to 2010, Favre started 297 consecutive regular season games with the Green Bay Packers, New York Jets, and Minnesota Vikings. If you include the postseason, Favre's streak reached 321 starts. The Hall of Fame quarterback set a slew of records before he finally hung up his cleats, but his marks for career passing touchdowns and yards have already been surpassed by the likes of Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, and Drew Brees. No one will be touching his consecutive starts record for, well, probably ever. Favre started every game for his team over 18 seasons, and no current NFL player is within a decade of tying his streak. An 18-year career is already a nearly unheard-of achievement for any professional football player. If they started every game for their team for their entire career, they would still be 9 games short of tying Favre's record. As teams and medical staffs have become more cautious with injury recovery, and front offices have become more willing to give younger players opportunities when playoff seeding has been clinched or eliminated, the task of breaking Favre's consecutive game starting record is unbeatable. Emmitt Smith, 18,355 career rushing yards. It's unlikely we'll ever see a career like Smith's again in the NFL. Spending the majority of his career in Dallas with the Cowboys, Smith was the offensive centerpiece for America's team during their dynastic 1990s run. At his peak, from 1991 to 1995, Smith led the league in rushing yards 4 times, rushing touchdowns 3 times, and won 3 Super Bowls. After the 95 season, Smith would record at least 1,000 yards from scrimmage for the next 7 years. While he was far from his old self in his last 2 seasons with the Arizona Cardinals, Smith still managed to amass 937 rushing yards in his final season at the age of 35. Had he wanted to, he could have very easily added to his incredible 18,355 career rushing yard tally. Walter Payton is a distant second place in the record books at over 1,600 yards behind Smith, and the only active players close on the leaderboard, Frank Gore and Adrian Peterson, would need multiple 1,000-yard campaigns just to pull within striking distance. Considering both players are already over the age of 35, it seems impossible to envision either coming close. After that, it's hard to envision any current player accruing even 13,000 career rushing yards, let alone come within earshot of Smith's position at the top of the record books. Paul Krause, 81 career interceptions. If someone asked you who the greatest defensive back in NFL history was, you'd probably say someone like Ronnie Lott, Champ Bailey, Ed Reed, or Deion Sanders. With that in mind, you'll probably be quite surprised to know that the all-time NFL record for career interceptions isn't held by one of the bigger names, but is one of the most unbreakable records in the league. Paul Krause recorded 81 career interceptions over a 16-season career, spanning from 1964 to 1979. To give you perspective, Richard Sherman and Aqib Talib are tied amongst active players within the most career interceptions at 35, less than half of Krause's career total. This is partially a symptom of rule changes that prevent defensive backs from grabbing and holding receivers as much as in Krause's day. But it's also worth remembering that for the majority of Krause's career, the NFL only played a 14-game regular season, and teams were throwing far fewer passes. Don't dismiss Krause as a symptom of his era. He was an all-time great. He picked off a league-leading 12 passes as a rookie and would average more than 5 interceptions a season for the rest of his career, ensuring no one would ever supplant him at the top of the all-time interceptions leaderboard. Eric Dickerson, 2,105 rushing yards in a season. Eric Dickerson set the all-time single-season rushing yard record in 1984 when he ran for 2,105 yards with the LA Rams. In 2012, Adrian Peterson came just 8 yards shy of breaking Dickerson's record with the Minnesota Vikings. However, the next best single-season rushing mark over the past decade is Ezekiel Elliott's 1,631-yard tally in 2016. As close as Peterson got, that may have been the last chance for a running back in the modern era to break Dickerson's record. As more and more teams have adopted running back by committee approaches and offensive schemes that integrate them more in the passing game, players are less and less likely to amass large single-season rushing yard totals. Dickerson exploded into the NFL field in 1983 after he was selected with the second overall pick in the '83 draft. As a rookie, he led the league with 1,808 rushing yards, but little did fans know he had even more in store for his sophomore campaign. Alongside his rushing yard total, in 1984, Dickerson also led the league with 14 rushing touchdowns and caught 21 passes for an additional 139 yards from scrimmage, just for good measure. LaDainian Tomlinson, 31 touchdowns in a season. LT was a problem. Fans from an older generation will think of the imposing New York Giants pass rusher Lawrence Taylor, but those familiar with the early 2000s San Diego Chargers remember LT as the incredible running back LaDainian Tomlinson. Selected with the 5th overall pick in the 2001 draft out of Texas Christian University, Tomlinson had rushed for at least 1,200 rushing yards and 10 touchdowns in each of his first 5 professional seasons. But his 6th would be both the pinnacle of his career and the year he set the single-season touchdowns record. The Chargers went 14-2 during an incredible regular season run led by Tomlinson, averaging over 5 yards a carry on 348 attempts. LT amassed a league-leading 1,815 rushing yards and 28 rushing touchdowns. That wasn't the only way San Diego got him the ball, though. He also caught 56 passes for an additional 508 receiving yards and 3 receiving touchdowns. He remains the only player ever to accrue over 30 combined rushing and receiving scores in a season. It seems like everything Tomlinson did that season worked. He even completed 2 touchdown passes for 20 yards. Don Shula, 347 career coaching wins. Don Shula is one of the greatest head coaches in NFL history. Over a 33-year career split between the Baltimore Colts and Miami Dolphins, Shula maintained an unparalleled level of success over such a long tenure. He'd never lost more games than he won in 2 consecutive seasons, and most of the time he was in the playoffs. His signature season came in 1972, when he led the Miami Dolphins to the only perfect season in NFL history. In 1973, he turned around and won the Super Bowl again. When he finally hung up his headset and clipboard, Shula won over 67% of his games, 3 league championships, and 3 more Super Bowl appearances. His career 347 wins is exactly 50 wins ahead of longtime New England Patriots head coach Bill Belichick, the closest coach alive. Belichick is no spring chicken anymore, already one of the oldest coaches in the league. His future remains unsure now that the Patriots don't appear to have a clear starter as quarterback. If he's unable to find a good option, Shula's record is probably safe for at least a decade. George Blanda, 26 seasons played. Tom Brady talked about playing into his mid-40s, and he's done a commendable job of maintaining effectiveness. However, in his 20th season at the age of 42, he showed his first signs of decline. Now with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Brady hopes the Florida Sun will help him stay in the league for as long as possible. But entering his 21st season, the future is still heavily uncertain. Regardless of what you think of Brady, there's no denying his sustained play has been one of the most impressive components of his career. Yet Brady is still unlikely to even tie the current record of 26 NFL seasons played, held by George Blanda. It's easy to guarantee that there'll never be a career like Blanda's again. Split between the Chicago Bears, Houston Oilers, and Oakland Raiders, Blanda had 2 careers in one. He served as his team's primary place kicker every year of his career, while doubling as a legitimate option at quarterback. Blanda was selected to the Pro Bowl 3 times during his time in Houston, from the work he did under center. However, by the time he got to Oakland, his contributions relied on his leg, where he managed to make the Pro Bowl one final time, entirely from his place kicking that led the league in field goal percentage and extra points made in 1967. So, what do you think? Could these records ever be broken? And if so, who's gonna beat them? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.